Thanks for clicking on the video. This is a Bushcraft Basics series, and today I want to talk to you about the bow drill, a friction firelighting method, which is a great method for firelighting for those that are interested in bushcraft or survival. What is a bow drill firelighting kit? Well, a bow drill firelighting kit allows you to create fire by friction. It's basically when wood rubs against wood rapidly and for long enough, the wood gets hot, produces a dust which builds up and eventually catches and turns into a smouldering ember, which you then transfer to a tinder bundle or a bundle of dried grass, and you blow it into flames. We've all seen it, very few of us have even done it, but today I want to talk you through my tips on creating a fire with a bow drill firelighting set. So the first thing we have here is the bow. This can be any piece of wood as long as there's a slight bow to it. Then we have a piece of cordage. This here I'm using a bit of, well, this is paracord. In a survival situation you could most probably use your shoelace, or you could quite easily make your own cordage if you know what trees to look for. When it comes to looking for trees to make cordage and different plants, we're going to be covering that in another video, so make sure you subscribe to this series and I'll show you then how to make your own natural cordage. But in the meantime, let's just say I've taken out my shoelace from my boot and I'm now going to use this cordage as my cordage for the bow. So component number one is the bow. The next component we have is the spindle. The spindle is what is wrapped around the string or the cordage, and then it turns rapidly into the piece of wood, which is called a hearth. And after a few, maybe half a minute or so, the dust will build up and catch light. Let's recap. Bow, spindle, and the hearth. However, there's something missing here, because when I'm drilling like this, I need something which is called a bearing block. That creates pressure, a downward force. That downward force is vital when it comes to creating the fire or the small ember right here in the notch. So we've spoken about these, the spindle, the hearth and the bow. I'll place these here for now, try and keep them off the ground to keep them dry, but it's the bearing block that we want. There's two options. I've got two go-to options when it comes to a bearing block. One, I've got a piece of green wood right here. I'm now going to quite simply saw into it, take off a piece that will just about fit in the palm of my hand, like this, like that. And what I like to do is just using my knife, split this down into two. This is going to be my bearing block. Now, using my knife, I very carefully create a bit of an indent, and then I flip it around, rotate it 90 degrees, and I'll just do that again. What we'll see is right there we've created a bit of a hole. That will now allow our spindle to sit into this hole. Because I've used this spindle before, you can see it's already been blackened. So I'm going to just trim this blackened end off, and it just roughens it up a bit, which gives it a bit more friction when you do use the bow drill into the hearth, or the spindle into the hearth. You don't have to remove all the black, just enough so it becomes a bit roughened up again. Likewise, I'm going to do that to the opposite end, well, the end that will go into the bearing block. So I'll put a bit of a rounded point onto the end here, because that's now going to sit into there. Those are the components. The spindle is made out of hazel. This here is a bit of hazel, and you can hear that high-pitched sound. This is bone dry. We could shave this down to create our spindle, but I've got one pre-made right here. Another thing that I want to talk to you about, in a real survival situation, you could make your own cordage you could gather these materials from the woodland, but if you've got access to flint, if you can find a piece of flint, this can be your cutting tool. You could use this to extract your components from a dead, dried, fallen tree, for example. So I mentioned to you there's two things I like to use when it comes to a bearing block. One is a piece of green wood, because the green wood, that's going to reduce the friction created when we're drilling. What do I mean? This end often gets very, very hot, and if this is a piece of dried wood, it's going to create lots of friction. This will start getting hot as well and start to smoke. You're going to lose a lot of your energy if you have friction in the top of your spindle and your bearing block. To reduce that, this is my favorite tip for anyone that lives on the coast and you know what a limpet shell looks like. Well, let's talk about limpet quickly. Limpets, they grow on rocks. What you do is you can peel them off or find them in a gully or in a rock pool. You want 2 limpet shells really, not just the one, you want 2. Because now I can put this limpet shell, or these 2 limpet shells, in my hand, in the palm of my hand, and as I'm drilling, there's no friction created. Right, with that being said, let's get straight to it. So I'm going to put those down there. I'm going to take my hearth. Because I've already used this hearth before, I now need to create another notch or another hole. So using my knife, I'll just create a small hole like that. I'll flip it around again and I'll do the exact same to the other side like this. So this is going to be a bit of a guide, because now what we're going to do is lightly burn in this to create a hole. Then we're going to come along with the knife and we're going to cut out a notch roughly the size of 1/8 of the hole, just like these other ones. So I've just taken my spindle, I'm going to wrap it into my cordage. There we are, nice and tight, holding it quite firmly, because as soon as I let go, that will just ping out and it will fly away. So you've got to make sure that's nice and tight. I'm going to put that end in there, and I've got my 2 limpet shells right here. What we're going to see to begin with is a little bit of smoke. Remember, we're not going to light the fire straight away. We're just getting everything ready for fire lighting. We want to burn this hole in so that it gives us the outline of the spindle, which we can then remove 1/8 of the hole from, like this. You can see it's giving us a nice outline. So now, using the knife, let's take out 1/8 of the hole. So for anyone that's never tried this before, I recommend using hazel. If you can get hold of hazel, try making up these 2 components, being the hearth and the spindle, using hazel. Make sure the wood is dry, obviously, because otherwise it will make it a little bit more tricky. So we've created a notch right here. You can see there's roughly 1/8 taken out of that notch. Place my knife down, go back over here. Now we can start to create our fire. But before we do that, we need to create, well, we need an ember pan. So this ember pan will go underneath, so that when we create our ember, we can lift this off into our tinder bundle, blow that into a flame. So this ember pan goes right there. In fact, for this demonstration, I'm going to place it that way so that you can see the powder building up, or the dust building up in the notch. And just like we did before, I'm going to place this down. And one tip I have as well is try and use the whole length of your bow. Rather than just do small strokes in the middle, try and use the whole length. This will really help you to create lots and lots of hot dust. And remember, it's that hot dust we want. That's what's going to create our small, smouldering, glowing ember. And if I stop right there, I can see almost instantly that we've created a small glowing ember. You can see that smouldering away. Well, at the moment, you can just see smoke. If I gently drop that out, so it's a very small ember we've got here, really small. What I would normally do is, I would normally drill for maybe 60 seconds, maybe 45 seconds, but that could have been maybe a 25-30 second drill. Anyway, we've got this smouldering ember. It can take a bit of your breath away. You've got maybe a minute or so before this ember will go out, so feel free to catch your breath and get the other things ready for your fire lighting. What do I mean? Well, over here we've got some dried grass. Nice bit of dried grass right there. And you know what? Bushcraft is all about using resources. So if you're able to identify nature's resources and use them, why not? For example, we've got some cattail. This is a type of reed. Really fluffy stuff, and it's a great one for bow drill, because what you can do is take your ember, drop your ember straight onto this, and it really helps it smoulder away. What we're going to see now is a very thin light grey smoke. The nearer we get to the flame, the thicker and the darker and the browner and the more creamy the smoke will become. So that is how you create fire by friction using the BOWDRILL kit, which is right here. You know, BOWDRILL, it looks a lot easier than it is, especially if you're new to bushcraft or new to trying out different ways of fire lighting when it comes to bushcraft methods. Don't give up with this stuff. Keep trying. Eventually you'll get the technique. One real good tip I want to give you, which I didn't mention when I was doing it, is the position that you find yourself in when you're drilling the spindle into the hearth. Let me just recap. So if we go back down here, and then let me flip this around that way. So again, have your ember pan underneath the notch, because that's going to collect all the dust. Now, by placing your spindle into your cordage, and then using your bearing block, remember I'm using limpet shells, but you could use the piece of wood that I carved from earlier. So why not? Let's use it. There's the piece of wood with the hole in it. Place your spindle into the hole. So I just mentioned position, and it's a really important thing to mention. If you look at my shin and my left forearm, they are locked in. What you don't want, and this is what you see with a lot of beginners, is people going like this and whoa, and everything flies everywhere. To really steady yourself, try and lock your shin in to your forearm or your elbow into your knee. So just to recap, look at this. We want this to be straight and no movement here at all. Because as soon as we have movement, whoop, we're going to lose it and it's going to ping out and we're going to not get our fire going. So that is it. Those are my tips for fire lighting using a bow drill. Remember, think about bushcraft, think about nature's resources. If you have to add something dry and fibrous, being a bit of cattail fluff or a bit of amadou or a nature's fungus, nature's tinder to your tinder bundle, then do it. Bushcraft is a world of resources. They're out there. You just have to use them to your fullest advantage. On that note, thanks for watching the video. Please follow the series. There'll be plenty more tips that you can do at home. Goodbye.